He wasn't supposed to survive. The words echoed in the cold Montana air as the battered German shepherd stood in the snow, his eyes locked on the figure ahead. He had no collar, no tag, just the remnants of a life that had once been full of purpose. Yet, there he was, staring into the distance, waiting for something, someone, who might never come. The storm was relentless, snowflakes swirling in the wind, biting through the fur of the dog who had survived against all odds. His body was worn, his limbs trembling from exhaustion, but his spirit remained unbroken. And then, a familiar scent drifted through the air, sharp and unmistakable. The man, the one who had always been there, was coming. Jack Turner, a Marine who had left behind the battlefield and was now returning to a quiet life he never thought he would find. The last time he had seen Max, his faithful companion, the war had taken everything from them both. The memories of blood-soaked fields and lost comrades haunted his every step, but the one thing he held on to was the promise he made to Max, the promise that they would never leave each other behind. It had been years since they last saw each other. Jack had returned home, scarred and weary, the pain of loss etched into his face. Max, the German shepherd who had saved his life more times than he could count, had been lost to the chaos of war. Jack had searched for him, asked everyone who would listen, but Max was nowhere to be found. It was as if the world had swallowed him whole. Yet, here Max was, standing in the snow, his amber eyes fixed on Jack, unwavering. Jack slowed his pace, his heart pounding in his chest. Could it be? Was it really him? He stepped forward cautiously, each footstep crunching in the snow as he approached the dog who had been more than just a pet. Max had been his partner, his protector, his friend. Jack knelt down, his hands shaking as he reached out, calling softly, "Max." The dog's ears perked up at the sound of his voice. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a faint whimper escaped from Max's throat, and he took a hesitant step forward. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The bond between them, forged in the fires of battle, was still alive. Max recognized him. Max remembered. The dog's tail wagged weakly, the first sign of life Jack had seen in what felt like an eternity. Jack's heart swelled with emotion, the weight of years of searching, of wondering, lifting from his chest. He reached out, his fingers brushing the fur on Max's neck. "I'm here, buddy," Jack whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm here." Max let out a soft bark, his body trembling as he nuzzled into Jack's arms. The years of separation melted away in that moment, replaced by the warmth of reunion, the pure joy of finding each other again. In that snow-covered field, in the midst of a storm that seemed to never end, Jack and Max were whole again. And for the first time in years, Jack allowed himself to believe in miracles. This was no longer just a reunion. It was a promise fulfilled, a bond unbroken by time or distance. It was a testament to loyalty, to love, and to the unshakable bond between a Marine and his dog. As they stood there together, in the heart of the storm, they knew they would never be apart again. The days following Jack's reunion with Max felt like a dream Jack never wanted to wake up from. The weight of war, the ghosts of lost comrades, and the loneliness that had plagued him for so long seemed to fade as he watched Max, his loyal companion, by his side. Max was more than just a dog. He was the reminder of a time when Jack had purpose, a partner, and a mission. The two of them had faced danger together, and now, after all these years, they were reunited. But despite the overwhelming joy of their reunion, something felt different. Jack could see it in Max's eyes. The spark that had once been there, the energy of a dog who had been through battles alongside his Marine, seemed dimmed. Jack couldn't help but feel guilty. Had Max suffered all this time without him? Jack had always known how much his K9 partner depended on him. He had trained Max not just to be his dog, but to be his protector, to know when to attack, when to retreat, and most importantly, to never leave his side. But now, Jack could see Max was tired, broken in a way that couldn't be fixed with just a hug or a familiar face. Max had been through so much. He had fought battles Jack could never fully understand. And yet, he had waited, never giving up, always holding on for the day Jack would come back. The weight of the years they had lost was heavy on Jack's heart. As he sat on the porch, Max lying beside him, Jack couldn't help but wonder about the years they had been apart. Had Max felt abandoned? Had he struggled through his own pain without the comforting presence of the man he had once relied on? These thoughts gnawed at Jack, but he knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't make the same mistake again. He had promised Max they would never be separated, and Jack intended to keep that promise. The days turned into weeks, and Jack focused on rebuilding their bond. It wasn't easy. Max, though grateful to be with Jack again, was distant, unsure of what had changed. Jack could see it in the way Max hesitated when he called his name, in the way Max lingered by the door, waiting for something or someone. But slowly, the distance between them started to close. Jack took Max to the places they used to go together. The park where Max had once chased squirrels, the trails where they had walked for hours. At first, Max walked with hesitation, unsure if this was another dream. But soon, the old Max began to emerge. He ran through the fields, chasing after the ball Jack threw with the same energy he had back in the day. Jack smiled to himself, feeling the weight of relief wash over him. The bond they shared was returning, slowly but surely. One afternoon, as Jack sat on the porch, watching Max play in the yard, he realized that the true power of their reunion wasn't in the grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was in the quiet, the small moments where Max was by his side, where they were together again, where the world felt right. Jack knew they still had a long way to go. There were things to heal, memories to rebuild, and trust to be restored. But for the first time in years, Jack felt a sense of peace. He had his dog back, and with Max by his side, there was nothing they couldn't face together. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon and Max lay down beside him, Jack knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it as a team, just like they always had. The seasons changed slowly, and with each passing day, Jack and Max grew closer. It was a bond that was hard to put into words, something deeper than just a man and his dog. It was the unspoken understanding, the silent promise that they would never leave each other's side. Max's healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional. There were still moments when his eyes would cloud over with memories of the past, of battles fought, of comrades lost. Jack noticed these moments, but never pushed. He knew that healing took time. One crisp autumn morning, Jack decided to take Max on a long drive. The kind of drive they used to take together before everything changed. He packed some water, a few snacks, and of course, Max's favorite ball. As the truck hummed down the highway, Max's head rested out the window, his ears flapping in the wind. Jack couldn't help but smile. Max had always loved the wind, the freedom of it. The day was beautiful, the kind of day where everything felt right, where the past seemed distant and the future didn't seem as daunting. They made their way out to a small lake tucked away in the mountains, a place Jack had discovered years ago. It was peaceful, quiet, just the sound of the water lapping against the shore and the occasional call of a bird. Jack parked the truck and stepped out, Max following eagerly behind him. They walked down to the water, the soft crunch of fallen leaves under their boots. For a while, Jack just stood there, watching Max as he explored, sniffing the air, running along the edge of the water. There was something about the simplicity of the moment that made everything else fade away. Max returned to Jack's side, panting happily, and Jack chuckled as he tossed the ball into the water. Max's tail wagged furiously as he raced after it, diving into the cool lake without hesitation. Jack watched as Max swam, his powerful limbs cutting through the water with ease, just like he had done all those years ago. There was no hesitation now, no uncertainty. Max was back, fully, in every way. When Max returned to the shore, dripping wet but triumphant, Jack knelt down, rubbing his dog's fur. "Good boy," Jack said softly, his voice filled with pride. Max looked up at him, his amber eyes full of love and trust. It was in that moment that Jack realized just how much they had both healed. Max was no longer the broken dog who had waited by the side of the road. He was the dog who had fought, who had loved, who had never given up. And Jack was no longer the Marine who had lost everything. He had his purpose back, his friend by his side, and a future that didn't seem so uncertain anymore. The sun was setting now, casting a golden glow over the lake, and Jack knew that this moment, this day, was one he would carry with him forever. They sat side by side, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the mountains. For the first time in years, Jack felt truly at peace. He had his dog. He had his friend. And together, they were ready to face whatever came next. The days grew colder as winter slowly settled in, but for Jack and Max, the world outside seemed to fade away. The small house that Jack had come to call home was warm, filled with the scent of coffee brewing in the kitchen and the sound of soft music playing in the background. It was a quiet life, one that Jack never imagined he would have after the chaos of war. But with Max by his side, the noise of the past seemed to lose its grip, replaced by the simple, comforting rhythm of their daily routine. Max had grown stronger each day. His coat shone with health, and his eyes, once clouded with the weight of the past, now sparkled with the joy of living. Jack often caught himself smiling when he saw Max chase after the squirrels in the backyard or curl up next to him on the couch in the evenings. There were moments, however, when Jack would look at Max and feel a pang of guilt. He knew the scars from the past, though invisible to others, ran deep within both of them. Jack had tried to protect Max in the chaos of war, but there were things he couldn't shield his dog from. And now, Max was more than just a companion. He was a reminder of the sacrifices they both had made. One chilly evening, as Jack sat on the porch with Max resting by his feet, a thought struck him. The small town they had settled in was peaceful, but it was also quiet. Too quiet at times. Jack missed the camaraderie of his fellow Marines, the sense of brotherhood that had defined his life for so long. He had isolated himself, not out of anger, but because it felt safer that way. But as he looked at Max, he realized he wasn't alone anymore. He had someone who understood the weight he carried, someone who had been through the same trials, the same losses. He couldn't keep hiding away from the world forever. The next day, Jack made a decision. He began reaching out to his old comrades, reconnecting with those who had once fought by his side. It wasn't easy. Some of the men had moved on, found new lives, but others, like Jack, still carried the memories of the battlefield with them. Slowly, they began to come together again, not in the way they had before, but in a new form, one where they could find solace in each other's presence. Max, of course, was there for it all. Jack found comfort in the way Max seemed to instinctively understand when he needed a moment of solitude or when he just needed someone to sit quietly with him. They had become each other's anchors, and with that bond, Jack began to heal in ways he hadn't thought possible. One afternoon, as Jack sat in the small coffee shop in town, chatting with a few of his fellow Marines, he glanced out the window to see Max sitting at the doorstep, watching over him. It was a simple moment, but it was one that brought him peace. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt as though he was moving forward. The past would always be with him, but it no longer defined him. He had found a new purpose, one that wasn't based on the chaos of war, but on the quiet moments shared with Max and the friends who had helped him rediscover his place in the world. As Jack stood to leave, he looked down at Max, who was waiting patiently at the door. Without a word, Jack opened it, and Max trotted inside, his tail wagging in the way that always made Jack smile. Together, they walked out into the world, ready for whatever came next. As the months passed, Jack and Max settled into a routine that felt comfortable, familiar, and, for the first time in years, right. The house, though small, was filled with warmth, both from the wood stove that crackled in the corner and from the bond between the two of them. It wasn't the life Jack had imagined when he first left the military, but it was the life he had now, and it felt like a second chance. Jack spent his days working on small projects around the house, tending to the garden, and taking Max on long walks through the woods. The quiet life had its own rhythm, and for Jack, it was enough. There were still days when the memories of war would creep in, when the weight of what he had seen and done felt unbearable. On those days, Max would stay close, never leaving his side, his presence a constant reminder that Jack wasn't alone. Max seemed to understand the unspoken language of Jack's heart, always there when he was needed, never asking for anything in return. One afternoon, as Jack sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Max was sitting at the edge of the yard, staring off into the distance. His posture was alert, his ears pricked, and for a moment, Jack thought he saw a flicker of the old Max, the dog who had once been his constant companion in the chaos of war. The dog who had never given up, even when the odds seemed impossible. Curious, Jack stood up and walked over to him, his boots crunching in the gravel. As he approached, Max turned his head, his eyes meeting Jack's with a sense of calm that Jack hadn't seen in a long time. It was as if Max was waiting for something, something that only he knew was coming. Jack sat down beside him, his hand resting on Max's back. They sat there together, in the fading light of the day, sharing a quiet moment. Jack didn't know what Max was waiting for, but he felt a sense of peace settle over him, as if the world had slowed down just for a moment. It was in that moment, as the wind whispered through the trees and the stars began to appear in the sky, that Jack realized something important. Life, despite all its hardships, was still beautiful. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the loud moments. It was about the small, quiet moments shared with those who mattered most. For Jack, that meant Max, his loyal friend, his partner, and the one who had stood by him through everything. As the evening grew colder, Jack stood up, brushing the dirt from his pants. He reached out a hand, and Max, as if knowing exactly what was needed, rose to his feet. They walked back to the house together, the sounds of the night surrounding them. There was no need for words between them. They understood each other without speaking, their bond stronger than anything Jack could have ever imagined. Together, they had found their way home. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt truly at peace with the life he had built, a life filled with love, loyalty, and the quiet comfort of knowing that, no matter what the future held, he would never be alone. As the months turned into years, Jack found a new rhythm to life, one that was calm, steady, and filled with purpose. The seasons changed, but the bond between him and Max remained unshakable. It was during one particularly crisp fall morning that Jack decided to take a step he had been avoiding for a long time. He was going to visit his old military base. Max, ever by his side, wagged his tail as Jack prepared to leave. The idea of going back stirred something in Jack, something deep inside him. It wasn't about the need for closure anymore. It was about reconnecting with the parts of his life that had shaped him, for better or worse. It had been years since he had left the service, but the memories, some painful, some proud, still lingered like echoes in the corners of his mind. As Jack drove the familiar roads that led to the base, Max sat quietly beside him, his head resting on the seat, eyes focused on the road ahead. The journey felt longer than it had before, each mile heavy with the weight of Jack's past. But with Max there, he felt a sense of reassurance, as if he wasn't facing this on his own. When they arrived at the gates of the base, Jack took a deep breath. It was different now. The buildings were older, the air filled with a sense of change, but the memories remained. He parked the truck and sat there for a moment, letting the weight of the past settle around him. Max's low whine broke his thoughts. Jack turned to see his dog looking up at him, as if asking, "What's next?" Jack smiled softly and reached over to ruffle Max's fur. "We'll take it one step at a time," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Together, they walked through the base, the familiar sights and sounds of military life slowly creeping back into Jack's consciousness. It wasn't the same as it had been. He was no longer a soldier in uniform, marching alongside his comrades. But the connections, the shared experiences, were still there. The men and women he had served with greeted him with open arms, their faces lighting up when they saw Jack and Max. They exchanged stories, laughter, and memories, and Jack found comfort in the fact that he wasn't the only one who had changed. Max, ever the silent companion, stood by Jack's side, his presence a steady reminder of the loyalty that had always been a part of Jack's life. After a while, Jack sat down on the same bench he had sat on years ago, his thoughts quiet and introspective. Max lay at his feet, content, as if knowing that this was a moment of peace they had both earned. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves on the trees, and Jack closed his eyes for a moment, letting the world around him fade. The sound of his fellow Marines talking in the distance, the laughter, the familiar rhythm of the base, it was all there, but it didn't feel like home. Not anymore. His home was with Max, in the quiet moments they shared, in the bond they had built together after everything had fallen apart. Jack knew he would always carry the memories of his time in the service, but now he had a new purpose. It wasn't about the past. It was about the present. And as the sun began to set over the base, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing that no matter where life took him next, he and Max would always face it. Together, as the days grew shorter and winter settled in, Jack found himself reflecting more on the journey that had brought him here. He had come to appreciate the quiet moments, the simplicity of a life with Max by his side. The echoes of the past were still there, faint and distant, but they no longer haunted him as they once had. He had learned to live with them, to carry them like a badge of honor rather than a weight around his neck. Max, always the loyal companion, had become not just a dog but a symbol of everything Jack had fought for: hope, resilience, and a future that didn't have to be defined by loss. One snowy afternoon, Jack decided to take a break from his usual routine. He had spent the morning working on a small project in the garage, but the silence of the house had begun to feel heavy. He needed to get outside, to feel the crisp air, to move. Max, as always, was more than eager to join him. Together, they set out into the woods behind the house. The snow crunched underfoot, the trees bare and silent, save for the occasional call of a bird in the distance. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that Jack had longed for but never truly experienced until now. As they walked deeper into the forest, Jack couldn't help but smile at the way Max seemed to navigate the snow. His coat, thick and strong, stood out against the white landscape, his tail wagging with every step he took. Max was at ease, in his element, and Jack couldn't help but envy the simplicity of it. Life had always been complicated for Jack, filled with decisions, battles, and the constant need to prove himself. But now, with Max by his side, it was different. They walked without a destination, content to simply be together in the quiet of the world. The sound of their footsteps was the only noise that filled the air, and Jack felt a sense of connection to everything around him: the trees, the sky, the earth beneath his feet. It was as if time had slowed down, allowing him to breathe, to really be present. After some time, they reached a small clearing in the woods. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow across the snow. Jack paused for a moment, taking in the view. The world felt still, as if everything had come to rest, just like him. Max wandered a little further into the clearing, sniffing at the snow, his curiosity as boundless as ever. Jack couldn't help but laugh at the sight. There was something about Max's energy, his pure joy in the little things, that reminded Jack of the importance of living in the moment. They stayed there for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the sky turning a soft shade of pink and purple. As the last of the light faded, Jack knew that this was where he belonged. With Max, in the quiet moments, surrounded by the world they had built together. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long while, Jack felt ready to face it. Whatever the future held, he knew he wouldn't be facing it alone. With Max by his side, he could face anything. As the first signs of spring began to appear, Jack and Max felt a shift in the air. The snow was slowly melting, the earth beneath their feet softening with the promise of warmer days. It had been a quiet winter, a time for reflection, healing, and finding comfort in the simplicity of their routine. But as the days grew longer, Jack found himself thinking more about the future, about what came next. The life he had built with Max was everything he had ever dreamed of, a life of peace, love, and quiet companionship. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more for them to experience, more for them to give. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch, watching Max chase after a ball in the yard, Jack realized that it wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about living. He had spent so much time hiding from the world, trying to outrun the memories of the past, but now he understood that he couldn't keep running forever. The future was waiting, and it was time to step into it. Max bounded over to him, his tail wagging furiously as he dropped the ball at Jack's feet. Jack laughed, feeling the weight of years of tension lift from his shoulders. He picked up the ball and tossed it across the yard, watching as Max eagerly ran after it. The sight of his dog, so full of life, so full of joy, gave Jack the strength to take the next step. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was theirs to walk together. And with Max by his side, Jack knew they could face whatever came next. As spring gave way to summer, Jack began to venture outside the familiar walls of his home. He took Max on longer hikes, exploring new trails and discovering hidden spots in the mountains they hadn't yet visited. The world was vast, full of untold stories and adventures waiting to be experienced. And Jack was ready to embrace it all. He still had moments of doubt, moments when the weight of his past would threaten to pull him under, but with Max's steady presence, those moments became easier to bear. They were no longer just a Marine and his dog. They were two souls who had found their way back to each other after everything had fallen apart. One evening, as they stood at the edge of a cliff, Watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jack knew this was where they were meant to be. It wasn't the past that defined them, but the future they were building together. With Max by his side, Jack had everything he needed. Together, they would keep moving forward, one step at a time, into whatever came next. As summer continued, Jack and Max's connection deepened even further. The days grew longer, and the warmth of the sun filled their time with new adventures. They began to take trips to local parks, where Jack could walk for miles, while Max ran happily ahead, chasing birds or exploring new scents. It was a simple life, but one that Jack had come to treasure more than anything. There were days when Jack would sit outside, watching Max play and letting his thoughts wander. The peace he had found with Max was unlike anything he had ever known. The sense of calm was almost foreign to him. So much of his life had been spent in turmoil, and now it seemed as though the world had finally slowed down enough for him to breathe. But there was something else on Jack's mind. He had grown more open, more connected with the world around him, and a feeling stirred in his heart, a feeling that he needed to share this peace with others. It wasn't about just living for himself anymore. He wanted to give back, to help others who might be lost or searching, just as he had once been. Jack thought about his fellow Marines, those who had served alongside him, and how many of them were still struggling to find peace, just as he had. He knew that, in his own way, he could make a difference. One day, while sitting on the porch, Jack looked over at Max, who was lying next to him, his head resting on his paws, content. Jack's heart swelled with gratitude for the dog who had never left his side, who had been there through every storm, every battle. "You know, buddy," Jack said softly, as Max lifted his head and looked at him, "we've got to share this with more people. We can help." Max's ears perked up, as though understanding. Jack smiled. The idea of starting a program to help veterans and their dogs came to him as naturally as breathing. He had been through the struggles, the pain of adjusting back to civilian life, and he knew that the bond between a Marine and his dog was something powerful, something that could help heal. Over the next few months, Jack began working on the idea, slowly putting together a plan to connect with local organizations and to reach out to fellow veterans who might need support. With Max at his side, Jack had found his purpose. The program grew, connecting veterans with therapy dogs, helping them build the same kind of bond that Jack had found with Max. It was a slow process, but Jack was patient. He knew that healing took time. He often reflected on the path that had brought him here, from the chaos of the battlefield to the calm of his small home, and now, to this mission of helping others find peace. Max, as always, was right there with him, leading the way. Jack had found something that he never thought was possible, a new mission, one that was about giving back, sharing the healing that had come through his bond with Max. And as the days passed and the program grew, Jack couldn't help but feel that, in his own way, he was finally home. Together, they were making a difference, one step at a time. As the months passed, Jack's program began to make a real difference. Veterans from all walks of life were reaching out, eager to find the same peace and healing that Jack had experienced through his bond with Max. It wasn't always easy. Some veterans were reluctant to open up, others struggled to connect with their dogs in the way Jack had with Max. But Jack remained patient, understanding that healing was a slow process. He often found himself in quiet conversations with these veterans, sharing his story, explaining how the bond between a Marine and his dog could be a source of strength and solace. It was in these moments that Jack felt truly fulfilled, knowing that he was helping others rediscover a piece of themselves they thought was lost forever. Max, ever the steadfast companion, played a crucial role in these sessions. There was something about the way Max would sit quietly by the veterans, his presence calming, his loyalty unwavering. He had a way of making people feel safe, of showing them that they weren't alone, that there was still something to fight for. Slowly, the program began to grow. More veterans reached out, eager to work with the therapy dogs, eager to experience the healing that only this bond could bring. Jack watched with pride as the program expanded, reaching more people than he had ever imagined. But despite the growth, there were still moments when Jack would find himself reflecting on the past. The memories of his time in the military, the pain, the loss, it all still lingered. But now, those memories no longer defined him. They were a part of who he was, but they no longer held power over him. His life with Max, the work they were doing together, was the present, and it was beautiful. One evening, as Jack sat on the porch with Max, watching the sun set behind the mountains, he thought about how far they had come. From the chaos of war to the calm of their little home, and now, to this moment, where they were helping others find peace. Jack had found his purpose, and it was everything he had hoped for. Max, as always, was there, his head resting on Jack's knee, content and calm. Jack reached down and scratched behind Max's ears, his heart full. "We did good, buddy," he whispered. Max looked up at him, as if understanding, and gave a small wag of his tail. There were still challenges ahead, but Jack knew that with Max by his side, they could face anything. Together, they had found a new mission, a new life, and it was one they would live to the fullest, making a difference in the lives of others, one step at a time. As time went on, Jack found himself becoming more connected with his community. His program had grown, and with it, his sense of purpose. He wasn't just helping veterans and their dogs. He was creating a network of support, a family of people who understood each other's struggles in ways others could not. The bonds that had been formed through his work were stronger than he ever imagined. Veterans who had once felt isolated and broken now stood together, united by the same mission, healing, through the love and loyalty of their dogs. Jack had always known that his time in the military had changed him, but it wasn't until he saw the impact of his work that he truly understood just how much he had grown. The man who had once struggled to find peace in the aftermath of war had found a new mission, a new purpose. And Max, as always, was by his side, his presence a constant source of strength and stability. One evening, after a particularly successful therapy session, Jack sat with Max on the porch, the sun setting in the distance, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. He couldn't help but smile, his heart full as he watched Max lying at his feet, his eyes peaceful and content. There were times when Jack would reflect on the journey they had been on, from the darkest days of war to this quiet life they had built together. He had thought that healing was something that happened in the past, but now he realized that healing was an ongoing process. It wasn't just about moving on. It was about learning, growing, and being there for others who needed support. Jack's bond with Max had taught him that. Max had never asked for anything in return, had never wavered in his loyalty. And now, through their work, Jack was giving back to others in the same way Max had always given to him. They had both come a long way, from the chaos of war to this peaceful life in the mountains, helping others along the way. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Jack reached down and scratched behind Max's ears, a silent thank you for all that he had done, for all that they had done together. Jack had found a new purpose in life, a life filled with meaning and connection. He had found healing, not just for himself, but for others as well. And it was all thanks to the unwavering loyalty of a dog who had never left his side. Together, Jack and Max had built something beautiful, something that would last, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of the veterans they helped. They had found peace, and with it, they had found a new mission, a mission of giving, of healing, and of living fully, one day at a time. The days grew warmer as spring fully arrived, bringing with it new beginnings for both Jack and Max. Their little corner of the world had transformed into a haven of peace and purpose. Jack's program continued to grow, reaching more veterans who, like him, had once felt lost but were now finding healing and support through their connection with their dogs. Jack had found something he had never thought possible, a way to give back, to make a difference. Each day, veterans walked through the door, each with their own story, their own struggle, but all of them found solace in the companionship of their dogs. Jack had become not just a mentor, but a symbol of hope for those who thought they would never heal. His bond with Max had become the foundation of his work, the driving force that kept him going when times were tough. Max, as always, was the constant, the calm in the storm. His presence was a reminder to everyone that healing wasn't just about the mind. It was about the heart, the bond between a person and their dog, the quiet moments of connection that transcended words. One evening, after a long day of sessions, Jack sat on the porch, watching as Max lay by his feet, his eyes half closed in contentment. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting a golden glow across the landscape. Jack took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh, crisp air. It was moments like this that reminded him of how far he had come. He had once believed that healing was a destination, a place to reach, but now he understood that it was a journey, one that never truly ended. As the days passed, Jack's bond with Max only deepened. They had become inseparable, partners in every sense of the word. Jack couldn't help but smile as he watched Max chase after a ball in the yard, his tail wagging in excitement. The joy on Max's face was contagious, and Jack felt a warmth in his heart that he hadn't known for years. He had found a peace that he never thought was possible. But even with all the peace they had found, Jack knew there was more to do. He knew there were still many veterans out there who needed help, who were still struggling to find their way. And he was determined to continue helping them, to make sure that no one else had to face their battles alone. Max, as always, was there by his side, ready to help. Together, they had created something beautiful, something that would continue to grow and touch the lives of others. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Jack looked down at Max, who was now resting at his feet, his breathing steady and calm. Jack gently scratched behind his ears, a silent thank you for everything Max had done for him, for everything they had done together. The future was still uncertain, but Jack knew one thing for sure. As long as he had Max by his side, there was nothing they couldn't face. Years passed, and Jack's life continued to evolve, each day richer than the last. The program he had started had grown into something much larger than he had ever imagined. Veterans from all over the country reached out, seeking the same healing that Jack had found with Max. They came with their own pain, their own battles, but they all left with something in common, the unbreakable bond with their dogs. Jack had helped to create a community, a network of support that stretched across the country. What had started as a small idea had turned into a movement. Jack often found himself in awe of how far they had come, reflecting on the lonely man he once was and the life he had built now, filled with purpose and companionship. Through it all, Max had never left his side. His loyal companion had become the face of the program, a symbol of what was possible when love and trust were allowed to heal wounds. Together, they traveled to different cities, meeting veterans and their dogs, hearing stories of struggle and triumph. Every place they visited, Jack saw how Max's presence changed people. The simple act of being there, of sitting quietly beside someone who had been through the unthinkable, was more powerful than words. Max had a way of connecting with people on a level that was beyond comprehension. He didn't need to do anything extraordinary. He just needed to be himself. Jack was often amazed at how a dog, with nothing but love and loyalty, could help people find the strength to face their darkest days. As the years went by, Jack's relationship with Max remained as strong as ever. The bond they shared had only deepened, and with each passing day, Jack became more certain that this was the life he was meant to live. He had found peace in a way he never thought was possible, and he had found a purpose that had brought him joy and fulfillment. One quiet evening, as Jack and Max sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains, Jack realized that their journey together was far from over. There were still so many people who needed their help, so many more veterans who needed to feel the comfort that only a dog could provide. And Jack knew that, no matter what came next, he and Max would continue to walk that path together. As the night sky began to fill with stars, Jack placed his hand on Max's head, feeling the warmth of his loyal companion beside him. It was in moments like these that Jack knew he had found everything he needed. With Max by his side, there was nothing they couldn't face. Together, they had created something beautiful, something that would last, a testament to the power of love, loyalty, and the healing that came from the bond between a man and his dog. Jack had never felt more at home, and with Max by his side, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be.